In 1901, at Spindletop Hill near Beaumont, the future of Texas changed dramatically as, like a fountain of fortune, thousands of barrels of oil burst from the earth towards the sky. Soon, Detroit would be cranking out Model Ts by the millions, and America was on the move, thanks to the black gold being produced in Texas. Now, more than a century later, the vehicles are different, but nothing else has truly changed. Sure, there may be many other alternative energy sources like wind and solar and electric. But let's be honest, America depends on oil and entrepreneurs, and if the USA is truly going to be independent, it has to know the crude truth.
NAPE is a proud sponsor of the Crude Truth. Be sure to register for the NAPE Expo 2024, February 7th through the 9th at the George R. Brown Convention Center in Houston, Texas. Hurry and register today. NAPE, where deals happen.
This episode is brought to you by LFS Chemistry, committed to being good stewards of the environment and providing the tools so you can be too. NAPE Expo, where deals happen. Air Compressor Solutions. When everything is on the line, Air Compressor Solutions is the dependable choice to keep commercial business powered up. Sandstone Group. Exec Crew. Elevate your network, elevate your knowledge. Oil and Gas Workers Association. Pecos Country Operating. Fueling our future.
Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time of the day or night it is that you turn in for another episode of The Crude Truth. Thank you very much for watching. Today, I'm once again here in the great state capital of Texas, of Austin. And today, my guest is actually another tremendous leader, a trailblazer, a legacy guy, not only in the political side of things, but also in the oil and gas industry. My guest is also, I can't believe I'm saying this, another repeat guest. I'm just so humbled and honored. My guest today is George P. Bush. George, how are you doing?
Not too bad.
Oh my gosh. No, it is great for you to be back. I cannot thank you enough for coming back on. Like I told you quickly in the little pre-meeting, it was like the moment I knew we had Austin, I was like, George, I've got to get you back on to talk about all the stuff going on right now, from state legislation to the battle at the federal level with oil and gas, to even some new things that you've been up to since you've stepped away from the political limelight, for at least, in my opinion, for now. Okay, that's just my opinion, everybody, just for now. Okay, no, nothing here. But how are you doing? How's it been since you stepped away from land commissioner?
Well, it's been great. Obviously, as a military veteran, somebody who served as land commissioner for 2 terms, I do miss public service. But now that I'm a lawyer and in the private sector, my client is a little different. No longer is it the everyday people of Texas, which, again, I want to reiterate that I miss doing. I now have different types of clients, and I love fighting for them in all squares, whether they're public or private. But I remain active in politics, and I'd love to use this opportunity to talk a little bit about Restore Trust, which is a political action committee focused, in my opinion, on the biggest threat to our country, and that's the excessive amounts of spending. And looking back at the trillions of dollars, and yes, it's trillions.
With a T.
That was spent after COVID, and looking at the vast amount of fraud. Our PAC has done vast amount of research, and I want to get back to oil and gas because I know that's the focus of your show, but looking at over $200 billion of fraud committed just in response to COVID relief, and whether that be the small business administration programs that were out there or just cities and counties that misappropriated dollars, there's just so much waste. And the government has gotten way out of control. And just this week, it was deemed that our country now is at a AA credit rating as opposed to AAA credit. So as being the so-called most important country in the world, we're now at close to non-investment grade quality credit rating, I think speaks to the fact that we're spending way outside of our means. And so we'll be supporting Texas political candidates, both at the state level, the federal level, that are bold, audacious, that raise the red flag, that shine the light on the massive amounts of fraud and abuse that takes place in government.
I want to kind of go on a federal level with you talking about, here we are now at a AA rating. Is Bidenomics not working? I mean, if that's what's going on? I mean, if we're spending trillions of dollars in the waste, what are we looking to do here to fight Bidenomics and cut down on this spending?
Well, the hypocrisy of Bidenomics basically flows from the fact that their mentality is that government can solve all the world's problems when in fact, inflation and because of excessive government spending, it's resulted in the average American household decreasing significantly. I'm a part of a public policy institute known as the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity. We're a right-leaning think tank. It's actually based here in Austin, but we look at national issues, and we've looked at Bidenomics, especially in the context of energy and oil and gas, which is the largest line item in the American household. But because of the inflationary spending policies of the Biden administration, we've seen the net worth of the average American family actually go down. And I'm not talking about wages. He'll say that unemployment is low and wages have increased, which is true, but on a net basis, in terms of what the take-home pay is for the average American household, it's actually decreased over time. And look, energy is a big part of that. And if you look at inflation, energy usually is at the core of that. And if you had a more pro-Texan or a pro-business perspective on energy development in our country, you would have actually taken on the corrosive effects of inflation on the average household. And so Bidenomics is not working. I think that'll be shown at the ballot box as we approach November 24. But it calls upon states like Texas and other fast-growing states, shall I dare say Florida, and others that have also shown that limited government, responsible spending, and living within your means is the best approach to government.
Well, definitely living within your means is something I think everybody should be able to do. And then you talk about limiting government. I just think it's quite the opposite. And I, pointed out to everybody out there that here, your family, your grandfather was part of literally an administration that said the government needs to be limited. And now we literally in 2023 have a government that is saying, hey, government's going to come in and fix everything. And yet nobody wants to hear that anymore. That don't worry, the government's here. We're here to help and save you. And everybody, at least 50% of the country is saying, no, wait a minute here. I don't need your help. And I think that's definitely what you and your PAC are doing, are trying to bring in as well some of that, literally that trust back to not to the administration, but to government as well. And is that correct?
That is correct. I mean, we obviously are conservative leaning, but we know that the big, bold problems of, say, reining in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, those three programs alone are close to 2/3 of American spending. I mentioned the credit rating downgrade of our country this week. Among other things, the interest on debt alone, on the close to $32 trillion of debt that the nation owes to public and private entities, exceeds that of our national defense spending. And so in the report, you'll see that when asked why there's a downgrade, it's because of the inability of Washington, D.C. to solve its own problems. So we've actually brought on, and we've worked with people like Henry Cuellar, other kind of moderate Democrats, to work with Republicans to come up with sensible solutions. So, for example, on Social Security, what the scaremongers will tell you, including President Biden, is, oh, the Republicans want to cut and get rid of Social Security. Nobody is advocating that. What we're talking about is that people in their 20s, maybe teenage or even people yet to be born, wouldn't be able to be entitled to the program until later on than what the current entitlement is. Right. The people that are at or near retirement, they can take it to the bank that they will get their Social Security check. But unless we do something now, multiple reports and what our PAC has shown is that if we don't do anything the next decade, the program will be bankrupt.
Right.
That's the worst situation that you want, is to somehow strap on more debt on your national encumbrance instead of just doing something right now sensible and bringing in some Democrats and like-minded Republicans to the table to just come up with sensible reforms.
Well, when you talk about sensible reforms, and let's, and staying on the Social Security, okay. The best example of the government running a business, in my opinion, is the United States Postal Service. And it's, I think the best idea they've ever done is the forever stamp. Like now it's, you don't got to raise it and do all this. And, but that's not the best business model there is out there, is the United States Postal Service. And so how can you, with your group, really kind of basically wheel that in? I mean, it's like, hey, man, we've got to basically not bankrupt Social Security, but we've got to restructure the business. I mean, because that's what it is. So how can we, truly get bipartisan support for something like that?
Well, like all things, I think the great public policies of our country come from the state levels. And so I'm a big advocate of the 10th Amendment. And you look at states like Texas and Florida that have a tax-free medical savings account that allow people, when they're younger, because as we know, most medical cost expenses, over half in our country, are at or near within the few years leading up to death. And so if we're able to encourage a culture of saving, and again, that's not a government program, right?
No.
That's actually common sense for employers to emphasize to their employees or to individuals that just want to start on their own by saving sensibly, and even encouraging employers to perhaps match 401ks or other types of saving programs, whether that's for healthcare, for medical savings accounts, or others. That's the way to do it, instead of waiting for the actuarial crisis that we're facing right now. Because when Social Security and a lot of these programs were created, you had 40 payers into the system per one recipient. Now we're closer to 2 to 1. And, I hate to break the news, but we're not having a lot of kids in this country. We're barely at replacement rate.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that we're on the verge of a Japan or a Europe, but I am saying that actuarially speaking, the program is no longer where it once was.
Right.
And this isn't partisan. This isn't Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal. This is just common sense, business know-how, and pragmatism. I just wish that we had more supporters on the other side of the aisle that could just listen to these stats and work with us. But I'm positive. There's other areas of progress that we've made at the PAC, and that relates to oil and gas energy, where we're seeing permitting reform now. Even the president included in the budget renewal package that the pipeline up in the Marcellus Shale would be connecting the Marcellus to the New York, New Jersey, D.C. area. So, we are making progress here and there. We've just got to celebrate those victories when we get them.
Well, you talk about celebrating victories. We just got done here with the state of Texas, the legislation, and what a time that was here. But getting back to the oil and gas side of things that are going on, could oil and gas actually, give me the crude truth here. Your history knowledge, in oil and gas is ridiculous. Okay. I mean, I know you and I don't talk about it, but it is there. But could oil and gas truly get us out of this economic climate that we're in right now?
Well, it certainly helped Texas withstand the storm.
Okay.
If you look at what I shared, my old agency, along with the University of Texas and Texas A&M endowment now combined is over $75 billion. And those are endowments that support K through 12 and post-secondary ed. The rainy day fund is near its statutory maximum because of oil and gas severance tax.
Right.
The budget surplus coming into this legislative session was in excess of $32 billion, largely because of the oil and gas economy and because of the severance tax generated. I mean, this was like an alignment of the stars that this state hasn't seen quietly because of this part of our economy. So the difference between us and DC is that we get out of the private sector way. We say that this is good for our economy. It's paying excellent wages for all types of Texans from all types of backgrounds and educational backgrounds, whereas this federal government wants to punish it. I shared recently a study between the Bureau of Land Management, which is kind of like the GLO, but at the federal level, right? They manage 20x the amount of acreage that we did at the GLO, 13 million acres at the GLO, over 250 basically at the federal level. We reported on my year that I left office generating close to $2 billion in oil and gas royalty revenues, whereas that same year, the federal government reported about $250 million in revenue. So we 8 times the revenues generated from oil and gas revenues in the federal government. We did it with 45 employees. They have thousands.
Can you say that? Can you say that stat one more time? And please, and tell me what GLO is. I don't mean to say that stat.
General Land Office. Yeah.
Okay.
So the Bureau of Land Management, which is basically our counterpart, they manage over 230 million acres.
Yes.
Not all of which is oil and gas producing, but they do have Alaska and other prolific oil and gas producing areas of the country. The GLO, the General Land Office, the agency I used to manage, had about 13 million acres under its management. The year that I left, we generated about $1.9 billion for public education in Texas in 1 year. That same year, the Bureau of Land Management generated about $250 million. So we generated about 8x with a fraction of the employees. We have 45 employees at the General Land Office that manage those oil and gas minerals, whereas the federal government had several thousand employees. So it's just government can run things effectively. Texas knows how to do it. I've always advocated just let the federal government get out of the way. Let us do our job.
Right.
Not only in energy management, but in a whole host of other areas like permitting and which I talk about in my writing at Free Op and also at Restore Trust.
Well, you've been doing a lot of writing lately, and I've been enjoying them. But I know that the time we got, but let's keep it here with Texas. And if you had something that you could maybe say, or a policy that you could see helping Texas that would then in turn help, the United States of America. If you were a politician and you could, get something done real quick, what would you like to get done right now?
So I just wrote about that actually. It's a law that was passed during the Nixon administration called the National Environmental Policy Act. Well-intentioned to protect our environment, but again, drafted at a time when permitting was a lot easier. In fact, the average permit for an oil and gas well was less than a year. Whereas now, if you want to frack a well on federal land, say in New Mexico, where we don't actually have a lot of federal lands here in Texas, but let's say in Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, it now is in excess of 3, sometimes 4 years on average. Now, the same applies to renewable energy. So the big debate this legislative session is how do we fix our grid? Renewables got punished and condemned, though I think they're going to be part of the solution along with oil and gas. I believe that we need all forms of energy because this summer with 100-degree heat, we need more than 81 megs of power available for the grid. The one thing we can do to enhance energy and unlock the promise and prosperity of our great country's natural resources is to expedite the permitting under the National Environmental Policy Act, also known as NEPA. The average wait time for oil and gas and for renewable projects is several years, whereas in other countries, there's almost no permitting process. I'm not saying we get rid of it, but just expedite it. And one of the proposals that our think tank put out was to expedite it to a year-long commentary period, a reduction and cap on litigation penalties, so that these projects can get done in our lifetimes rather than private capital just sitting on the sideline.
And with private capital on the sideline, doesn't help us out at all. I mean, we really need it to continue to move this economy. It only its butts. Well, George, I know you've been busy and you're going to stay busy. How can people find the Restoring Trust PAC and get more information on that and everything else that you're up to while you're in the private sector?
Well, check me out online on my social media channels. You can also check me out at George P. for Texas, where I still kept that website. RestorePAC.com is where you can learn more about Restore Trust. It's RestoreTrustPAC.com, where you can learn more about what we're doing here in Austin and Washington, D.C. And freeop.org is where I'm putting up my public policy briefing. So I'm still active, still in the fight, and hope to be around the ring, in the coming years.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. George, again, I cannot thank you for coming on, especially here in Austin. I hope to have you on again soon. And that's it for this episode, and we'll see you next time on The Crude Truth.
Again, thank you to our sponsors, LFS Chemistry, NAPE Expo, Air Compressor Solutions, Exec Crew, Oil and Gas Workers Association.
The easiest way to start your own podcast and TV show? Real News Communications Network. Stand out from your competition. Produce streams of high-quality social media content. Become a thought leader in your industry. With RNCN, you get to be the host. We handle everything else. Tour one of our 3 locations in Dallas, Fort Worth, and the Colony. Call 972-402-6333 or visit launchashow.com to find out more.